What's going on, guys? I just want to talk about um, cheaper knives, and I know that's all relative, right? Some people might think $100 knife is cheap. Some people might think a $200 knife is cheap because they carry a $1,200 custom knife. It's all relative, right? So we're just gonna say a cheap knife, or an affordable knife, rather. We'll say cheap knife under $50. Let's just say that. Okay. So it's not above that. Let's say under $50 and or you can go down to 50 cents. All right. So there are a lot of pros and cons to having knives under $50, right? And there are some really good ones that I'm going to talk about at the end under $50, which I've mentioned a million times in my video, but it all relates to what we're talking about here. So growing up, like I've said in my other videos, I always had pocket knives. And the reason being is my dad was always the guy with the knife. It was Christmas, birthday parties, whatever we were doing. Nobody ever had a knife on them, ever. And now that I'm older, it drives me crazy. Like, it drives my dad crazy. Nobody ever carries a knife, ever. And a knife does not always have to be a weapon, right? It's a tool, and they are needed. I carry one every single day. I always have. And, when I was a kid, obviously, you want to be like your dad. And my dad always had a knife. He didn't have an expensive knife. He actually was a truck driver and worked for a floral department, and they had flowers and boxes and stuff coming from all over the world. And he actually had, which is a pretty decent knife, a slip joint Victorinox floral knife is what he used. He always had those. They were red with the cross on them, and it was razor sharp. He always had his knives razor sharp. Extremely, he always used to tell us, be careful, it's dangerous. And he always had that knife. It wasn't expensive, but he always had it in his pocket, and it did everything that he needed to. And if we were hunting, of course, we had larger fixed blade knives and some big folders and stuff like that for skinning, gutting, and whatever we needed to do. But everyday carry, EDC, he had this small slip joint Victorinox, and it did everything he needed to. So growing up, of course, I had a natural fascination with knives, being a boy, and I would go to the gun shows and see stuff like this and be like, Dad, I really want this. I have $2 in my pocket, and I really, really want this knife. And my dad would be like, maybe, let's walk around, and then we probably wouldn't get it or something. But I know I had a box of knives as a kid, and they were like, I don't know, $5 knives, $10 knives, and they were all wrecked, right? Because I was cutting trees down, I was digging in the dirt and doing all kinds of crazy stuff with these knives, and I wrecked them all. But they weren't worth anything anyway, so it was a good learning lesson for me. Some of them might have been dangerous because of the locking mechanism, and we'll get into that kind of stuff. But as a kid, I had a lot of knives, and I wrecked them. And at one point, I had a box of knives that I knew were not worth anything. I never looked at them, never used them, and I just purged. I just gave them away. I was like, do you want this knife? Do you want this knife? I got this at a gun show years ago when I was a kid. I don't want it anymore. I'm not going to carry it. And I still have some of those knives, right? And sometimes you get knives like this or like this or like this, and they're sales items. They're promotional from companies. And I don't want to dog on the companies. That's why I understand they have to give hundreds of these out, and they're on a budget, and they have to make ends meet, whatever. I get it. So they give these things away, and there's pros and cons to keeping and using that kind of knife, right? So as time has progressed, I think I have became an official knife snob. I can say that now. Am I going to be caught dead carrying this thing? Hell no, I'm not. I'm about to throw this away anyway, but it's good for a review. So I have become a knife snob. I've just focused my money. I've sold things to buy knives. I move money around. I try not to use stuff from my savings, actually. I try to sell things, pick up overtime, or do whatever I can to buy a knife, because I'm not going to buy it with a credit card, and I'm not going to go into debt over a knife. no knife is worth debt. I'll tell you that right now. So I always, try to allocate money, have cash on hand, pay for it outright, and then there's no stress, right? You already bought it. So, and when you get with cheaper knives too, there's not a whole lot of resale value either. When you have a more expensive knife, like a Chris Reeve, those are sought after, right? So people actually will spend almost the amount of money you paid for it, depending on the condition. And if it's discontinued or a rare model, they might give you the whole amount, maybe a little bit more. I don't know. It just depends, right? But I don't have knives to make money. I'm not going to hold on to them forever and make a killing. That's not how this works. Okay. So let's get into it. So knife collecting and everything is a rabbit hole, just like anything else, right? You can start with cheap fishing stuff, and then you start getting higher end reels with ball bearings and machining, and you get the better name brand, and you might buy a $800 fly rod to go fishing, right? That's a whole rabbit hole. Knives are the same way. Guns are the same way. Cars, probably. There's a million hobbies, and they're all the same way. Gardening, right? My wife planted a few bulbs one year. Then she started ordering bulbs from catalogs. Then she started ordering irises and stuff that were bred just last year, and they're genetically beautiful, and it just gets more and more expensive. It's a rabbit hole. Knives are no different. It's very, very dangerous. I would say, lean on the side of caution because before you know it, you have a ton of knives, thousands of dollars worth of knives. And I think I've done pretty well. I've sold a lot of mine, and I don't have a gigantic collection. So when you get cheap knives or you buy cheap knives, whether it be a promotional product like this one, this little slip joint here that's a shotgun shell, it's all for show. I have another rifle one somewhere. I don't know where it is. This is made by Maxim in China. Okay, I don't know what kind of metal this is. I'm sure it's not good. Could you cut a string and rope and stuff with this? Yeah, probably. So when you have a cheap knife, what are variables that you have to look at? In my opinion, the variables are safety, performance, and performance itself has a lot of variables. You're looking at edge retention, deployment. Is the lock going to stay there? Is it going to close on your fingers when you're using it? And then blade retention. When it's in your pocket, is it going to open and cut your leg open when you're trying to jump over something, or I don't know, kneeling down, whatever. Is there any kind of warranty, customer service? Can you call them and ask them, I have the shotgun shell model, it's got the gold, it's not brass, but it's a gold cap on the end, and it's got some glue sticking out of it, and I didn't know if that was normal. They don't care. Are you going to call Maxim and ask them that? I don't, so customer service, warranty, that kind of thing. And then material, which goes along with all of those, safety, performance, and the warranty, right? So this thing's obviously made out of plastic, and there's a lot of blade play here, and it's not very ergonomic, or it doesn't fit in your pocket well. There's not a pocket clip. I mean, these are things you have to think about, right? Would this be a fun knife for a kid to carry around in his pocket on the weekend with his dad? Yeah, sure. I mean, it's probably fine. If you trust the kid and he's a good kid, it's probably fine. It's not a big deal, but not something you're going to want to depend on, right? Look at that. So anyway, let's go kind of from worst to best of some of the stuff I have laying here. I don't have all the specs of everything or anything like that. Let's just go through some of the stuff. So obviously, a left-handed person, you're going to find a lot of the cheaper knives are not ambidextrous. And there are super high-end knives that are not ambidextrous as well. But it's nice to have options. Those are things that I look for as a southpaw. So you can tell this one here, I've tried to take this thumb stud off. I think it was pressed in here. So this is an ugly knife. And yeah, so you can't reverse the pocket clip. Normally I would have it here. I like a tip up carry, or either way, it would be on this side. So when you put it in the pocket, the blade is not going to open into your pocket. It's going to open away to the edge of your pocket. And then when you have to put your hand in there, if you have anything else in there, it would be away from the blade. But anyway, you guys probably already know that. You know, this clip is okay. Let's take a look. This is a Smith & Wesson cutting horse. I don't know where I got this thing. I think I got it for free somewhere. CH0029. A lot of blade play. It actually has a liner in the handle. There you go. So it's pretty nice, right? This is a liner lock because the metal liner here is actually locking the blade. Let's take a look. I don't even know if did that lock. Barely. So there's not a very high percentage of travel there. See, this little point here is supposed to make it a flipper. So you should be able to flip that. It obviously has plastic washers. You can barely see them. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. They are plastic, white plastic, maybe Teflon. And yeah, that's I can't even function this thing. So I don't know what kind of blade material it is. It's probably dangerous. I don't know. It would probably dull very fast, right? The knife might close on your hand. I don't know if I would trust this liner lock at all. It's very, very thin metal, and it's super cheap. The handle itself would probably break if it didn't have these liners. The blade is not centered. That's always something I look for as well. You know, just in a quality of a knife. So the tolerances and manufacturing, it doesn't matter because it's just a cheap knife, right? So that's the Smith & Wesson cutting horse. It's a piece of junk. So next, I had this knife given to me this year, and somebody was given this knife on a job site, right, by a contractor. Decent opening action, right, with a little wrist flick there, and it looks okay. You know, if you're really not into knives, it looks okay. So he said, "Do you want this knife?" "I don't want it." And I'm like, "Yeah, you know, whatever. I'll always take an extra knife." So here we got a seatbelt cutter or whatever you want to call it, and it's actually a razor blade. That's funny. I don't have like my Benchmade triage here with me right now, but it's actually a razor blade. So eventually I guess that will dull. You can't really sharpen that razor blade. I guess you can try. It has a glass breaker on it. Check that out. It's a freaking glass breaker. So I guess it's trying to be like a Benchmade triage, which I've done a review on. Watch the video. I have a desk review and an actual work review. And this thing makes a lot of noise. The blade is not centered, right? We talked about that. That's something us knife folk always look for. And the action is okay. This is a liner lock as well. Decent lock travel. You know, I don't think it would close. We have some really, really aggressive looking serrations here, and eventually those would wear down. I don't know what kind of metal this is. So this is a Rostfrei, handcrafted in China. I don't know what kind of wood this is. It doesn't seem very durable at all. You can see my nail marks in it. It's pretty soft wood. It does have a full liner. Check that out. Full liner. It's very, very slick. There's not a whole lot of jimping on this thing, right? There's no jimping here at all. There's a little thumb ramp, which is cool. I love that. I guess that is the only jimping. I don't see anything else. So it's a very, very slick knife. If this was wet, it'd probably slide out of your hands. It possibly your hand could slide forward underneath, over the serrations there. So the coating on the blade actually looks decent. You can see some machining marks in there and stuff, but it's pretty sharp. It is pretty sharp. I don't know what kind of metal it is. So anyway, the reason this is low on my list, I know it looks kind of like a little tank, but the problem is I brought it home that night. it doesn't have a pocket clip. I really like a pocket clip for fast access and stuff like that. So I just threw it on my desk here, and when I did, I noticed something. I just tossed it on my desk, and I looked down, and the freaking knife was open like that. So we talk about safety, right? I just threw it down, just like that. So there's no blade retention, right? I've mentioned that. That's one of the things I look for. There's no blade retention. So that's definitely an issue. You know, when you're carrying this in your pocket, you jump over something, or, you know, you move or whatever, and it opens, and this is in your pocket, you could have a big problem. So I would take this knife. If you wanted this knife, I would take it off your list. Yeah, I'm sure you don't want it. This is another free knife that somebody got. It is weightless. I can't actually feel it in my hand. I mean, it is very, very light, so that's great. You know, a lot of people like that for everyday carry. It doesn't have a reversible pocket clip. And then look how much the pocket clip sticks out. It's huge, right? Even for a right-handed person. So I am definitely not right-handed, but let's give it a shot here. So very rough opening. That's not comfortable for your hand at all. I don't even know where you're supposed to hold on. I guess in front of the clip here. But if you change your grip, it's definitely not comfortable, and it's especially not comfortable for a left-handed person when you're trying to put your thumb around that clip there, right? So it's not very ergonomic. That's another thing that you look for in performance, I would say, is ergonomics. It's not going to put a blister on your hand or anything like that. It should be comfortable to use for a long time. There's no jimping at all on this knife like a Spyderco might have. I think this is kind of like a Spyderco wannabe kind of thing. I'm not really sure. There's a little bit of traction here. It's worthless. One thing, I don't do this with every single knife, but there is a lot of blade movement, and I feel like I'm going to break this. You know, I feel like I could really break this thing. It does have plastic washers. I checked that out earlier. It is a lock back. I don't think it's necessarily like the lock's going to fail. I don't know what kind of metal that is. Maxim. That's interesting. Didn't we already see Maxim and a really high quality knife earlier? So in China, headquarters in the USA. I don't know what kind of metal this is, but I'm sure it's not good. So the edge retention would be very bad, and it would dull when you need it. You would have to sharpen it every day, something like that, if you're really using the knife that much. Okay. There's not much holding this handle together, right? There's one screw here. There's a pin here for the lock. I don't even know what is holding the knife together back here. Glue, maybe? So the materials and things like that are definitely lacking, right? And I don't know if somebody tried to take this apart or that's just stripped. See that screw there? I don't know. But I wouldn't really trust this knife. So you could probably cut some boxes open or something like that. So I got this knife because I bought a pair of $100 Carhartt coveralls, right? It locks very good. It's a lockback knife. It's kind of like a little buck knife or something is what it looks like. I don't know where it's made, and I'm guessing China, but I really don't know. Carhartt does now have plants in China, I think. China or Taiwan or something like that, which is unfortunate because it's such a great American company. But anyway, won't even go there. Yeah, so I don't know what kind of blade this is. It's decently sharp. I think I touched it up. I carried this knife for a little bit just for fun, cut open some boxes and stuff like that. It's fine. I think it's pretty sturdy. There's not a lot of movement in the blade, actually. Just a little cheap Carhartt lockback, you know. It's decent. So I think it's safe. I think this will be a safe knife to carry. I don't think the edge retention is going to be there. I don't think I could go to Carhartt and say, hey, this lock failed on me, because I don't think Carhartt makes this knife. It's just like a freebie that you get. And they don't expect it either because they know this thing's worth like $3 or something. So, but this is actually a little decent knife that I got for free. I probably wouldn't carry it much or anything like that, but for free, it's decent. So, this knife I actually picked up at like a roadside souvenir shop or something. Me and my buddy were just stopping by, and I was kind of still early in my knife game, always very, very interested in knives. And I only had like $30 and this thing was 35. And, those kind of shops, I'm not good at bartering, but those kind of shops, you're just kind of like, hey, I only have $30 on me. And the guy's like, okay, darn, and kids. And so this is actually is a very good action. It's a Magnum stainless. I thought that was made by Boker. I'm not really sure. So Taiwan. It does not have a reversible pocket clip. So that's one thing that would be a con for me. But it actually is a fairly deep carry. The lock here is extremely cheap. It's just a piece of plastic. You can hear that. But as far as the locking mechanism goes and the action on the knife is pretty good. I carried this knife for a pretty long time and I sharpened it up. It's decently sharp. I'm sure it's some super, cheap kind of steel. I don't know. I think it dulled up pretty quick and then I just kept resharpening it. I never really used the serrations, but they are pretty sharp. But I think I got this knife for $30 off Highway 44 in Missouri. On the way to Rolla. So the action's actually great through all these years. Still works. I don't know about the blade retention because the lock doesn't stay. But yeah, so it's probably a safe knife. Blade's not centered. It has plastic washers. Not a whole lot of play in the blade. So anyway, there's that. This is a knife that my cousin suggested as a really, really cheap knife. It's a Schrade. The model is SCH221BK. And, he lives in Alaska and he swears by this thing. He said he has completely tortured it and it just keeps cutting. I don't know what the blade material is, but it's a heavy, not a whole lot of play or anything like that. So, I think it would actually be a decent knife. But anyway, decent action, pretty sturdy. It is a liner lock, and it's probably pretty safe. So I would say go for it. I think this thing was under $10 for a Schrade, so that is a cheap knife. It looks like the grip would be pretty good, but it's really not. So it's a pretty slick knife. You can't move the pocket clip for me, for a left-handed person, so probably wouldn't go there, but decent knife for, I think it was $10. It was really, really cheap. So these are just like multi-tools that I would say are not really great. I think they're good for a kid. They keep you busy. They have a lot of different things to mess with. And, this one, I think I use this as a hammer. Look at that thing. I think I wrecked it. So that's one of my earlier knives that I just tortured. But I don't even put these in. The materials are not great. You got a spoon and a fork on one, though, so you might need that. This is one of the better cheap knives that I bought. This is a Gerber pear frame. It's a great knife. I think I got it for $14. It is a frame lock, right? Like Chris Reeve. This is not a Chris Reeve knife, but this said lifetime guarantee, and I carried this for at least a year, I think, and absolutely loved it. I'm not sure what the blade material is. It's fairly decent for $14. The lock is fantastic on it. I gotta say, look at the travel. It's not going anywhere. It's a pretty sturdy knife. There's not a lot of movement. There is plastic washers in here. I never thought about turning this into Gerber for any kind of warranty or anything. I did actually cut my hand one time, so maybe a mark off for safety there, right? But for 14 bucks, Gerber pear frame, the pocket clip's on the wrong side again. It's a right-handed world. I get it. So decent knife, really is. It's so decent, I bought its little brother as well, right? Never used it. I don't even know why I bought it, but it's kind of funny. So these two knives, but one of the better knives, I gotta say, that I've ever bought for that amount of money. It's pretty cheap. And then obviously you guys know these knives, we're still under $50 here, and these would be my go-tos. You have the Spyderco Tenacious, which I've done a review on. It is the 8CR 13 MOV steel, which is okay. Has awesome ergonomics, full steel liners. It's very, very sharp, flat grind. This thing was like $45 at Wally World. So edge retention, the blade retention's good. The pocket clip is 4 position. You can put it wherever you want. G10 liners, so very, very durable. Spyderco is a good brand. This was made in China. They also have knives that are made in the USA, but they do stand by their product. I think you could actually contact them if something happened to this, and they would take care of it for you. Very, very good company. Okay. And then last but not least, we have the $40 beast, the Ontario Rat 1. I know I just did a review on this. So this is made in Taiwan, but this is, in my opinion, the best budget knife. 4-position pocket clip, put it wherever you want. It is a liner lock, just like a lot of these knives. It's got a good lockup. D2 steel, which is a machine steel. It's very, very good material. This knife is super ergonomic, and I think they would definitely stand by their product if you contacted Ontario and told them you had a problem. This is one of their best sellers. Has bronze phosphor bushings, which is amazing. I know I've talked about that already. Look at all the back spacers. I mean, these knives are very stout for under $50. So you have the Tenacious and you have the Rat 1. And this is probably as cheap as I would go. All the knives under this, except maybe the pear frame, and there's a million knives out there, right? But anytime you go under this, you're going to see problems with safety, performance, warranty and customer service. Probably you're going to see cheaper materials, lower edge retention. It's just not going to be worth it. I would just save up your money. This is $14, $45. I think this one's $40. So I would just save your money, get a little bit better knife, and it's going to perform better for you depending on what your needs are. So that was just a little knife talk, knife banter, whatever you want to call it. And I have a lot more reviews coming up. If you enjoy watching this kind of stuff, hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends if they like knives or like talking about knives, and have yourselves a great night.